regarding data dissemination and data access and reuse and in Malaysian public research institution has not been developed or designed with OER in mind. So this amendment is very important in order to ensure consistency between the existing policies, and this policy that we have in mind is the IP policies, research dissemination policies, and publicly funded research commercialization. And that means 5 minutes, right?
3 minutes.
Okay.
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Oh, I can make it in 1 minute. The second one is amendment to existing laws in Malaysia, in particular Copyright Act, the core of our recommendation. And finally, to introduce laws to facilitate open access and reuse of publicly funded research data, which is, we have in mind, the Federal Research Public Access Act, being introduced in the USA, not yet passed and legislated for the past 7 years. And finally, the Data Quality Act, also from US, already in place, already in operation, and very much useful to be introduced. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Hasim. Thank you very much for bringing a very important topic to our attention, research data. In my earlier role at UNESCO, I was trying to promote open access to scientific information. In fact, open access to scientific information, open educational resources, and open data makes a triangular competent approach to promote education and research around the world, because education and research are two sides of the same coin, and that's we all work for. And thank you, Hasim, for your presentation. For I think we have around 45 minutes now to end up the session. What we would like to know, take forward is a discussion on the four presentations from the perspective of policy. I would like to engage you and request you to think yourself that what are these four presentations bring to us in terms of policy implications for institutions and as well as national governments. While you think about these issues, I would also like you to that if you have noted down questions for the speakers, you can raise those questions or comments that we will integrate in the discussion. It's open to the floor, please. Any takers? Anything? Anyone to ask any question? Okay, I have a couple of questions. If you are not taking questions, specifically, I would like to start with asking a very specific question to Meena, especially about OCW. If you can elaborate a little bit about OpenCourseware's approach to adopt new members. Probably members from Asian countries would be interested. Especially what are the kind of commitments, institutional commitments that you look forward in your members. I have several discussions, people talk about where the MIT OCW started. There is a perception that OCW is kind of one of the issues that that came on Karina's paper about in Australian higher education. It's about OER is about marketing. Some people do talk about OCW as a marketing approach. Is it really true in terms of philosophical and practices that OCW promotes and institutional commitment that OCW asks for? I think that kind of a clarification for the audience would be very appropriate in terms of new memberships that might be coming to OCW from this region. Can you keep this mic?
Geez, that was a lot of questions. Okay, what do we do in order to increase membership? Well, of course, we do have our community outreach efforts in different communities in different regions and different communities, such as we don't work with just higher education institutions. We work with research institutions, government institutions, etc. Now, about your perception that universities tend to use this for marketing purposes, I would say that many universities have enjoyed publicity coming from their commitment to open courseware. I can't quantify that, of course, but as you can see, MIT has moved on from an excellent engineering school to just an amazing engineering school. If you go to any place in Africa and speak to people about what MIT has done, they talk about how the transparency in MIT's curriculum have affected their curriculum and how they want to pull up their education level up to what MIT is doing. So they're offering a standard in education also. For UCI, they have some more tangible results from having an open courseware project, which is they have people who people who go through their open courseware courses and then sign up in their School of Continuing Education. So quite a big number of new enrollments that they have in the School of Continuing Education is people who've done their open courseware courses. So what do we tell people when we talk about membership? Well, first of all, there is not a big barrier in becoming a member. You just have to show commitment to creating open courseware contents or utilizing open courseware contents. So we have members who are doing translations only. We have members who are utilizing OER contents that are already out there to make new courses. So it's not just about producing contents. A lot of it is about using contents. And it's not just the institution that's enjoying the publicity. It's usually it's the teachers who are getting a lot of publicity from their published work online. For example, if you publish in a journal, only the people who've got subscription to the journal can have access to it. Whereas if you publish an open courseware course, so many different people can have access to it, and professors like Walter Lewin from MIT is now a star physics professor. He's on TV shows all around the world, really. He's got a TV program in the Netherlands talking about physics. The kind of publicity that you'll be getting, the teachers will be getting, is something that was just not imaginable a couple of years back. I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you very much. That's a starting. Paul.
Could I just add an interesting point to almost exactly what was just said, that MIT in the SQ university rankings in the world was positioned third last year. Harvard first, Cambridge second, and MIT third. And the publicity they got from the OER, they moved up to first position. That was announced last week. So the authors do get this international recognition and the citations, and that's, if MIT is now taken the top position, I think that's quite a demonstration to get us to be more eager.
Okay, great.
When we are talking about the policies and practice with the Asian perspective, I think there is a proper need actually, that there are so many governments, there are so many organizations. These policies need to be actually a sort of standardized, and actually somebody to take actually the lead there to bring those organizations together. Until unless the policies and practices are closer in the nations, then only then we could actually, let's say, at the end we could certify not just open education resources, but then we could actually say the assessment of those is of actually, let's say, quality, and it is actually, let's say, there. Because we are working ourselves on 5-point agenda at our institution. We are working on the curriculum, standardization of that one. Then we are working on the content so that it actually matches with the standards. Then we are actually working on the delivery methods, so that that could also be actually documented and given. And then we are working on the assessment. One of the missing thing is still in many institutions. We actually push on the learning, but we are actually missing this assessment component, because that is one which will actually bring the authenticity of the learning and of all those resources at the end. And then the fifth one is actually getting the feedback, so that you verify at each stage that those things are actually quite good. And those were my comments, and probably some forum, maybe UNESCO, Commonwealth, or some other organizations could join in to actually, let's say, proceed further on that one.
Thank you. Anyone else from this side?
Yeah, my question is to Meena. It was a very interesting presentation where she indicated that the trend is towards multi-arm platform. So is there any kind of collaboration happening for sharing a single platform? For example, one organization is using a YouTube channel. The other organization could also make use of that channel for, maybe a replication or for courseware development or anything of that sort. So is that clear? Is it? Yeah, the platforms. Yes, yes.
So as you can imagine, we are just really big openness people. So when you develop something, the practice is, the general practice is that you make it open source so that other institutions can share. So if you would like to use the Orbit platform from University of Michigan, it's just out there for a free download. It's very easy to install. The same with anything else that has been developed within the community.
The platform is created outside it, like a YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it can be accessed.
Okay, Mike.
Accessed by whom?
Others.
Okay, we
Other
can
users.
go on. Raz, and then Dr. Kim. Dr. Kim. Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, all the speakers. I think I'm learning quite a lot from your cases and your experience. So I, as one who is heading UNESCO office in Bangkok, which is Asia Pacific Regional Bureau for Education, I'm thinking how best we can serve our member states in the region. By the way, we have 47 member states in Asia Pacific. Several of them are OECD member states, as we all know. But listening to you, it appears that, correct me if I'm wrong, these things can be done only in part of Asia, not the whole of Asia Pacific. Countries, as we all know, are at different developmental stages. So my question to all of you is, how can, if you have one or two messages to people working at the top level in each of the member states, what would that be? So what can you advise to top policymakers in our member states? That's one thing. Secondly, picking up some of the points from previous commentators, I'm trying to think how UNESCO can be more useful when it comes to OER, to our member states. So what would you advise to us? I mean, convening meetings like this, we can do with other partners, CEO and others, but what are the other things that we can do? Should we devise, for instance, an international law to promote OER, like we do in many other areas. We call it conventions. This convention approach would be applicable? I'm just throwing out these questions. Thank you.
Professor Manglasundar.
Thank you for the offer that what UNESCO should do. I have one suggestion, particularly in the education component of both the schools and the higher education. UNESCO can help us bringing the language experts of various countries or language organizations together, because very often what we do is we develop contents in a particular language, mostly in English, but OCW has demonstrated that quite a few of the partners from other countries doing translations on their own. You could help us in identifying bodies nationally so that this whole process takes on a national character when you translate the whole the material, and then it's available to not only the speakers in that language in that country but also everywhere else. There's one possibility immediately. Then of course you can also provide help to many organizations wanting to build OER, credible OER, but then you have to decide what is credible. That's going to be much more of an issue later.
Raz?
My concern would be this. In fact, it leads quite well from what Professor Sundar has just raised, and it relates to, in many ways, our institutions of higher learning especially have become slaves to government policies and government directives. It was a different situation when I was an undergraduate. Institutions had a certain pride, higher learning institutions had a certain pride on the autonomies that they enjoyed. And that especially relates to the content, the curriculum, the way they want to share that knowledge. Increasingly, having become slaves to government policies and diktats, we have moved away from challenging the paradigm of what is called as copyright policies to observing that paradigm. What is there to stop institutions from declaring their content is free of shackles? What is that? Now, if UNESCO plays a role, it will be that kind of role where it returns autonomies to institutions. It has to be an influence maker. It cannot, it's not a funder. You cannot fund all the things that we want to do. But you have access to 47 governments. 47 governments they don't have to change their laws on patents. But educational content, for God's sake. I mean, the former Director General of UNESCO said, knowledge is to be shared. A community that's not able to share its knowledge is very uncivilized. That's my word. Now, and that's absolutely right. And I think that's where UNESCO ought to be intervening. Influence governments to release their institutions from being slaves to policies relating to the ownership of content that they create.
This side, can you give this side? This side? Yeah.
2 microphones for you.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
I'll get
Mr.
back to you
Kabir.
there.
Yeah, if I may just.
Yeah.
Yes, your points are very well taken. By UNESCO, as we all know, we cannot advise countries to stay away from universities. But certainly, we can influence the policy process in many different ways. So again, my question to all the speakers would be, if you can share, what do you think would be most pertinent advice?
I will just take a question from there. So, yeah, no problem. Just we'll get back. Can we give the mic that side?
Okay, this is a bit different from the ongoing discourse that I really enjoy. But I would like to put this question. We have a policy environment, right, that we are looking at right now. But I would like to put the question of what is the cultural environment that that surrounds OERs. We have currently very protectionist policies, and I think many faculty and many people in the academia are also protectionist of their own intellectual property. So I would like to ask the presenters from Australia and South Africa, what are the important questions we want to look at when we're looking at the cultural environment, and maybe also Ms. Mina, when we're looking at the cultural environment within the academe, if you want to study that, what are the questions that we can start from?
Okay, I think we can take, 4 of you can take the questions or comments, something.
Unfortunately, I couldn't explore all aspects of my data, but to answer your question, cultural challenges, cultural issues were also raised as challenges for participants. Even their own academics, they recognize that the way they work today, the way they deal with their content, and sometimes we do have to understand that for them, it's their identity, it's their professional identity, and they have been working with that materials and developing through all the years, and they do get attached to this. But I think I can link to the answer to that question and try to answer you as well. Because one of other challenges is the lack of awareness, and that can be linked with culture. So if they don't really understand what they are, what OERs are, if they don't understand the issues of licensing, and it's not the end of the world, they will not lose everything they did. So if they can understand that, and there will be more development of OER within higher education institutions, I believe. So for senior managers, then I would say, according to what I've seen, and according to what I heard from people, for my participants, is that if they have the opportunity to have support and be more informed, so if senior managers can raise awareness of open educational resources within their institutions, I believe this will break some barriers. So that answers your question as well.
Just to answer your question on the questions that we can ask ourselves with cultural challenges, we have huge cultural challenges in South Africa, and at the moment we've got a movement towards Africanization because we're very influenced by the West, and there's no African voice coming out of Africa, African theories, African perspectives, and so a lot of our courseware is very Western orientated. Even if I look at our accounting books and business books, we're using American books, and it's got dollars and American scenarios, and so how do you get your students in Africa to relate to that when they're running little informal businesses, and you know that the scenarios they're working with are these mega conglomerates from America. So we've got a huge move in that at the moment, and I think is the contextualization of OERs is an important question. I don't think we can just use them. Although the world's becoming a smaller place, we still must hold on to our context within our continents and our countries. So I really think the first question we need to ask ourselves is, does it talk to the context of our students, and to repurpose and reuse based on that? I hope that answers your question. And then to you, Sir, UNESCO, I feel very strongly that policies are not enablers. They don't always, they're not always implemented. It takes champions to run the race, and it's in institutions. I'm sure you all see it everywhere. It's the champions that run with it. They motivate the others. They cause the energy, and it's not always at a senior level. And I think someone like UNESCO, if they can enable the champions with support, with workshops, I think communication's part of it as well, but it's to your lower level academics, if I can put it that way, the worker bees. Because policies don't enable things to be carried out. It's the skills that are needed, and especially if I look in our country, technological skills, design skills, that whole team approach, if that can be enabled by an institution like yours.
Oh, I'm the third one to answer this question. Well, cultural challenges have never been my area of research, since my area of research is in legal challenges. But what I can say is that cultural challenges very much embedded in the society and individuals. What I can offer from my perspective is how these cultural challenges can be overcome through a legal policy framework. Among the cultural challenges that I discover briefly from my research at QTs, challenges arising from academic enclosure, erosion of cultural of give, enclosure of knowledge common, information lockup. These are all cultural challenges that actually threaten the open science norm, which is actually the crux of open educational resources. So what can the law offers in order to, if not to overcome, but to reduce these cultural challenges, is to look into several components of open data or open educational materials. For example, like publicly funded research data or knowledge content produced by academics in public institutions, for example, in Malaysian public universities, and to design a policy framework whereby all these works should be released under open content licenses. In that way, the cultural challenges arising from enclosure of knowledge common, or also the information lockup, data withholding, information secrecy and all that, at least can be reduced, if not can be overcome by all means. So that is what I can offer in order to answer that question.
So I do work globally, and I've been in touch with many different people from various cultures. So I think most people here would agree that Asians are one of the more conservative people in the world. Even in the academia, people are more conservative, which means you don't want to disclose anything that goes on in the classroom. You're the king in the classroom and whatnot. But what's really interesting is that Asian countries have the best policies in the world for OER. So I'm going to tell you about 3 different policies that that's going on right now. South Korean government, the Ministry of Education, has been investing in research for the past 3 decades. And that is because in order for your universities to be known, you have to do research. So every single grant that came from the Ministry of Education was for research. The first education grant came in about three years ago. It gave $1 million to each university that won the grant. And one of the conditions for, one of the criteria for being selected for the grant program was the transparency of your university. It was about open data and open educational resources. So at the end of the 4 years, when you've used up all of the $1 million, you have to have an open courseware project. Okay? No other country has such a policy right now from the Ministry of Government. If you look at the Vietnamese case, their VOER project is a government project. And that started because they realized that lack of resources meant that you have to share as much as possible for everybody to have certain resources. The same in Indonesia. They have this project that the Ministry of Education is running with this organization called Apticom. Apticom is an association of 700 computer science departments in Indonesia. I don't know if you know Indonesia very well, but it's got 18,000 islands where people do have to study from distance. What they're doing is they're modifying OER bits and pieces from all over the world to translate and to modify for Indonesian context to give out certificates for learning at such cheap price. And this is government-funded project. So what's really interesting about Asia is that, yes, it is such a closed society, but when the government says we have to do this, it happens. So now, my request for Dr. Kim now is, I think it'll be great if UNESCO can acknowledge these policies as best practices and let all the rest of the governments know that there are such policies and how they're working. So let's see, South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, the Ministry of Education in those three countries a lot of times have very similar policies. They failed together when the governments were trying to adopt Linux for the companies. They succeeded together when they were trying to promote OpenCourseware, I suppose. But they are supposed to be even more closed societies within Asia also. So I think, right, so just sharing best practices among governments and pushing for that and why it succeeded in those countries would be really good.
Thank you. Professor Menon?
Hello. Yeah. I am Mohan Menon from Wawasan Open University. It's an interesting thing that coming up about why governments don't open up. And traditionally, I mean, I come from South Asia, and traditionally knowledge was supposed to be shared and not to be sold. You know, that has been the culture. And you find in the governments also that today I was actually talking to some bureaucrats from the government of India, and they say, oh yeah, all the materials that we have publicly created, public money, and also the public supported autonomous institutions are all available. We don't want to sell that. But then what then comes in the way is the question. It's probably a lack of understanding that how this could be really shared. Otherwise, it's not a financial issue, as I can see. It's not a question of money. And I'm very glad that this is one of the declarations that the UNESCO called World Declaration has come out with, is to influence the governments to release those publicly funded and created the resources. I think that's something which is important to do. And many of the institutions are reluctant in these countries to go forward and do it, because there is not even we don't know really that what sort of a license that we can. All countries have not agreed for CC BY or whatever. There are many countries which have not really agreed for that. So how that can be done? Can there be an alternative to that? Are some of the debates that we may have to have, and that's where probably UNESCO can really come in to create such forums where governments could be. So I really don't think that's a major issue that many governments may like to change, really. It's a lack of awareness, I think. Thank you.
When? This side, please, Mike.
Wayne McIntosh from the OER Foundation. An excellent question, Dr. Kim. What can UNESCO do? I think the first thing, continue to do what you're doing. And I'm being very serious about that. The UNESCO COL 2012 Paris Declaration is going to move this agenda forward in ways which were just not possible before, because you're engaging that discourse with governments. And then the open policy issue is a no-brainer. Creative outputs that are funded by taxpayer money should be released for the benefit of society. And that's what the Paris Declaration does. And I agree with Raj. I mean, at the institutional level, it's pretty straightforward. We have the autonomy to move forward within our own institutions. We can do this. I think the two areas that are most significant in terms of moving the OER space forward, and the two biggest challenges we're going to face, and only an international agency can assist here, and that is the cross-border issues, and you've alluded to that in your presentation, and the quality assurance issues at an international level. The rest of the stuff we can do. In terms of capacity development, all of us here can do this. We have free courses, that are out there to build capability across the planet with no restrictions. UNESCO could possibly help in getting the word out and working with the community. And thank you for the opportunity.
Any more intervention? Okay. Okay. Two more to go.
Just Dr. Kim, we saw actually graph about education for all. There are many countries who are on the who will reach the target. There are, I think, many more countries who will not reach the targets. I think that's the area where you could actually implement the policy immediately for the open education resources from all other actually nations, perhaps. And that could bring actually this education for all little faster among the population, especially the underprivileged people Professor Raj actually earlier discussed. So we could actually all together say for those people who are underprivileged, who have no access to education, we could open the education resources of all other countries at the school level, and also could translate those into actually, let's say, the languages where they could understand and they could be educated. Thank you.
Rosalind?
Not to cool down the enthusiasm that is in this room, but seen from outside, not from somebody who is in this community, I think the challenges are still quite enormous. I mean, it's one issue, for instance, where are the main university, the mainstream university are not in this room. Yeah, you have the distance education, but if you see the leading